INFP and INFJ brains work differently. I'm here with Dr. Dario Nardi, and he's scanned the brains of INFPs and INFJs. So today you're getting definitive answers about INFP and INFJ differences straight from brain science. You'll learn how to recognize your type, which type you are based on how your mind, how your brain actually works, not just stereotypes and online tests. And today we're going to dive deep with the researcher himself who has done the groundbreaking work of mapping personality types in the brain. So again, you'll understand the core differences and you'll recognize your patterns and finally stop second guessing between which type if you were confused. So he's a UCLA professor, neuroscientist, author, and the world's authority on brain science of personality type, Dr. Dario Nardi.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me again. And there are a lot of INFPs and INFJs in the brain database, and every year we get more. The two types can easily be mistaken, and even within themselves, they may feel I'm some of this and some of that. And the neuroscience doesn't, it's not going to say definitively, this was your brain imaging result, you are definitely this type or that type, but is going to give feedback that inevitably, and I really mean this, inevitably gives the kind of concrete reference points that the person then needed in order to figure out.
Mm.
For example, is it normalizing INFP or creative INFJ? A sort of
Mhm.
subtype. Their brain networks look very different from each other, but they can look similar to each other in practice. And the person is just sort of wondering, am I this or am I that? And they get these extra data points and be like, oh, okay, now this makes sense.
Mhm.
Again, I think it doesn't change the fact that it's a little bit hard sometimes to see on the outside. An INFP who has their stuff together and looks very like professional and slick, that kind of thing, might very much look like an INFJ. And the INFJ who roams around in a van and is part of a music group might look very much like an INFP. And that's so it is understandable. And they're both very interested in identity and who they are and what they're capable of. And I think that there is a lot of overlap in the same way that people debate sometimes INTP or INTJ. Although I think that's a more obvious, usually it's easier to sort those.
Is it? Why is it easier to sort those, do you believe?
I think maybe one reason is it goes down into the function theory.
Mhm.
And there's a fair number of people whose sixth function, and we know this from a tremendous amount of data of 200,000 people, the sixth function is more in use. And so the skills are more developed than people usually give credit for. And as
Yeah.
John Beebe has said, the numbering system 1 through 8 is actually arbitrary just for us to have a common reference point. You've actually created a really great graphic to reflect this. And I think that INFPs and INFJs can, especially INFP, develop a decent amount of introverted intuiting. And if the INTP does that, it's their sixth function. It's not in a way that's going to be mistaken with INTJ. And it's less likely to occur, in my opinion, for whatever reason. Yeah. Yeah. In
Okay.
fact, I was at a workshop last summer, and this was like a spirituality workshop in Sweden. And just going around the room scanning and seeing these people for a whole week and interacting with them, I could almost tell which ones were the INFJs and which one were the INFPs just
Mm.
by looking at them after being with them for a few days. The INFJs are a little bit more angular and precision oriented and sort of
Mhm.
following the rules a little bit more. And the INFPs are a little bit more relaxed and not as maybe attentive to their body, but still usually
Sure.
reporting. And one reason they're there is they have body pains and that kind of thing, not sure what to do about them. And
Mhm.
and then the two co-leaders and the INFP, Jonathan, has such a challenge staying on task and it's his class. But I
Uh-huh.
guess he feels he has a whole week. So we can go off for 5 minutes on a tangent.
5 minutes. Yeah.
And except his 5 minutes usually turn into 15 minutes.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah. But I really go for him, to be honest. That's the number one reason. And he's in his 80s, so I don't know how long he's going to last. So I'm just going to keep going and getting those extra
Mm.
doses of INFP as long as I can.
It's your INFP prescription.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, thank you for indulging me in that little side tangent about the other personality types too. I will try to keep focused on INFPs and INFJs. So we've talked a little bit about just dipping into INFJ and INFP, but at a high level, what are the most striking differences that you've seen through the brain activity between the two different types?
Yeah, there's probably three things that stand out the most. One is that NFPs or FP types, particularly INFP, are really, really good listeners. And I say that from actually looking at the two main auditory regions of the brain. And I'm
Hmm.
not talking about the abstract use of language in your head and things like wordsmithing and using metaphors and whatever. I'm just talking about actual attention in the moment to the sound that's coming in. And for INFJs, there's a lot of focus on word content. Like they're focused on what the person is saying and how they're saying it, how meaning like which words are you using. And it's the same when they also produce stuff that they're going to think for a moment, what's a either diplomatic way to say this or what's an analytically correct, like according to theory way of
Hmm.
saying this. And I mean, everybody listens, but INFPs, you see, yes, there's a lot of attention to word content, but you also see a lot of attention to the affective qualities, which is more like the right auditory area of the brain, which is
Hmm.
voice tone, intention, also goes along with music, things like melody and stuff like that. And then adjacent to that part of the brain is regions that are involved in values and beliefs and likes and dislikes. And the INFP, assuming that they care to listen, because sometimes they'll be like, I've already listened to you so many times, I don't need to listen to you again. But assuming it's something new or it's interesting or it's really important, in fact, I should almost reverse that. I should say, unless it's something that they don't want to listen to for sure, that there is this attention, including what's not said. And I think
Hmm.
this gets back to the idea of NFJs really tend to take at face value, especially INFJ, what somebody says. And
Hmm.
INFP is like, well, I know you use those words, but I think you meant this other thing. And
Yeah.
and that's why you can be sort of a sloppy speaker with an INFP. And with INFJ, especially if it's in their subject matter area or they're trying, like it's a interpersonal problem solving situation, they're going to be much more like, oh, like you said it that way when you could have said it this other way. And so that gets into their critiquing. And that really does show up in the brain as the strong skill for INFP with both, and everybody does both, but INFJ is definitely strongly leaning toward word content. Then the other thing is INFJs are dominant perceiving types. So I know this is confusing, and this doesn't happen in socionics, for example, but the P and the J are not necessarily that helpful
Yeah.
because they're pointing to the function that points to the outer world, not your actual dominant function. So INFJs very often, and I'm thinking of many dozens of them, clearly have like more right prefrontal cortex activity, which is our sort of open-ended CEO. It's process oriented, it's taking in new information, it's reflecting on that information. And INFPs are like, oh, I do that too. Well, yes, we all have both CEOs. But what I get time and again over the years, especially with the clients who know type and they know they're INFP, they're like, wow, I came out much more left brain than I expected and left prefrontal
Hmm.
cortex, which is associated with decision making and explanations. And they're like, no, I'm a terrible decision maker. And I'm like, no, you're actually long-term decision maker. And those are
I
two
love it.
very different things. So if I put you on the spot to decide in this moment, do you want what kind of ice cream do you want? They're going to be like, oh, there are so many options. But if it's a decision like whether they're going to have regular ice cream or we're going to say animal ice cream, milk ice cream, cow ice cream, there's the word. For you INFJs
Hmm.
out there, I'm trying to find the right word, versus like vegan ice cream. The INFP will have maybe decided at some point either it doesn't matter or they're going to be vegan for ethical reasons or whatever it is. And then that's a very easy decision to make. And
Hmm.
INFPs have made a lot of decisions like that over the course of their lives. How am I going to live my life? And in that sense, to me, it's not a surprise. And they are dominant judging types, so they are going to be more left brained in general.
Hmm.
And humans as a whole are a little bit more left brained. But it's feedback I get. all the time. They're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was so left brain. And I'm like, don't worry, you have a creative side too. Especially when it comes to something like vision, for example, the judging types tend to be more good at focusing on one particular thing. Like there's a sign that I'm looking for as I'm driving, or
Mm-hmm.
there's some particular landmark that I'm looking for specifically. Whereas the perceiving types tend to be more like, oh, there are all these things going on. Oh, look, there's a bird, which is really great when it's something like you're driving and, oh, look, there's a child running into the street because
Mm-hmm.
you weren't overly focused in terms of visual precision. That also means things like the INFP might leave typos or missing words or whatever in their document. And the INFJ is like, no, I read this 4 times looking for typos and to make sure that I followed a particular like usage style handbook or something like that I learned in school, which is even too much for me, by the
That
way.
sounds painful. I was
No,
just like,
and
I don't know.
I don't even, I'm INTJ and I'm like, I don't do that. I have my way of doing things and it
Sure.
shouldn't be an egregious error. But like if it doesn't follow a social standard that's out there in the world, I don't really care. The third thing is not my research. I don't do this, but for a long time, the focus of EEG, and it's been around for 100 years roughly, has been on sleep studies.
Mm.
And a big difference between INFJ and INFP is sleeping. And
Interesting.
somebody even proposed to me, like, oh, you should really do a study on sleep because there probably are differences in terms of what happens in the brain as people are sleeping. And INFJs and ENFJs are notorious for having difficulty sleeping. And I think that's for a variety of reasons. One is that their problem solving mode, the introverted thinking, which is also somewhat neurotic for them at times, like just goes around in a circle all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then paired with introverted intuiting, they're creative, sort of starburst. They're like, oh, good, I'm alone. It's dark. There's no inputs from the outside. I can actually focus now. I'm lying here
It's
in the
time to
dark in
think.
bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can think now, except that they don't have a convenient button to just turn that off.
Yeah.
Whereas I think INFPs have can have a very erratic schedule in terms of sleeping unless they force themselves to say like I'm adopting this habit, but they don't just like lie awake for hours and hours usually like trying to solve a problem in their head unless it's like, oh my god, my family's being evicted tomorrow, I need to figure out something.
Mm-hmm.
And even then the INFP will still probably go to sleep.
It's
so
the
so
best way to solve the problem.
yeah,
Is to go to
yeah, yeah.
sleep.
We'll figure it out when we get there. And then, so that goes back to something which I have studied a lot, which is the creative mode and creative flow. And I think maybe we can talk about this as a separate question, but
Okay.
the way they do creativity is very different.
Okay. Would you like to talk about that now, or should we talk about some of the differences between how, I guess, FI shows up more in the brain and how NI shows up more in the brain?
I think we can do both of those at once. It's great. Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
But yeah, yeah. So both types are intuiting feeling types, which means that they're going to and do draw upon resources in the brain, develop skills that support those functions. So they're going to be good at the abstract use of language, for example, both of them,
Mm-hmm.
metaphors and even concepts and categories and noticing patterns like visual patterns, abstract patterns, whatever it is. That they're both good at, they have these resources also interacting with other people, what's probably going on with this other person, sort of as you're interacting with them. It's through different channels, but the INFP is more listening for, yeah, what is this person not saying that's like really important to them?
Mm-hmm.
And I use the same trick, like actually getting through school, even in engineering. I would listen for how the teacher's voice tone would change as the teacher emphasized certain things. I mean, they are emphasizing it, but it would completely go over the head of some students. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but I can see he feels this thing, or I can hear he feels it's more important to him or she.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, that's surely going to be on the test then. So I'm going to make sure to study for that. Whereas the INFJ would be much more focused on like, oh my God, there's so much material and I need to figure out the underlying principles so that I really
Yeah.
understand what I'm supposed to know. So there's these individual resources that can overlap quite a bit in terms of understanding others. Still, regions involved in sympathy and empathy can be pretty active. Imagining what if I am this person in this situation, like how would I feel? Something like
Hmm.
that. Where the creativity part comes in, though, is this when they're trying to sort of be in the creative flow, that creative flow, the starburst, which is a very classic in the way it shows up in the brain imaging, like live, you can see it on the screen, that INFP has this Christmas tree pattern where like all the brain is active or like most of it is active and this part of the brain is doing this and that part is doing that and just sort of the hallmark is that it's all active.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes in and adds something from the side, they say they pop into the room and they're like, oh, by the way, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't really impact the INFP that much. I mean, as long as the person doesn't eat up all of your time, because their brain isn't trying to maintain some perfect mode of flow, because their perfect mode of flow is for the different parts of the brain to be doing different things,
Mm.
playing around in every region with this, that, and the other thing. INFJ and introverted feeling is all about maintaining this mode where every region of the brain is in sync. It's showing delta waves and very high amplitude delta waves, which is different than sleep mode, which is also delta waves, but like low level delta waves.
Mhm. This
Um,
is for introverted intuition, right?
this is introverted intuition. And the person is trying, the INFJ is trying to maintain synchronicity throughout all of their brain. And so if somebody pops into the room and says something, that's going to turn on their part of the brain that pays attention to word content. They're
Hmm.
also maybe going to start thinking about what does that person need or like what's going on with them. Like also their feeling function gets activated in terms of like interpersonal stuff. And then that knocks them out of their flow state. So they need to have this really like nice, even, every part of the brain is in sync. This is why NJ types would be like, I'm in my creative project work mode now. I'm closing the door. Do not disturb. And if you do disturb me, I'm going to be politely impatient for about 30 seconds and then I'm going to bite your head off. Um,
Sounds about right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're like literally interrupting my brain from
Mm.
being able to do what I want to do. And that is, I think that's really a hallmark of the difference between them in terms of creativity.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's great. Just first of all, to know and then appreciate that this is how your brain's working. So allow it to do the thing that it wants to do. And in order to do that, I know it can be difficult for us INFPs. We have so many ideas. We have so many different things that we want to play with, right? And we want more distractions. We want music playing while we're doing this other thing and doing this other thing. And it's okay if somebody comes in.
Yeah.
Um, but also working with that in a way that is productive, aligned with the magic question of like, what is your goal? What do you want to have happen? Right? Like, and
Mhm.
and kind of getting all that to work together. And then for INFJs to allow that time for sensory deprivation or just tuning things out so that their brain can do the things that it really needs to do. I can see it as a challenge for both. But once you at least know it, then you can lean into it more and you can work on creating a system or an environment that helps with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of my suggestions, having observed, taking writing classes and observing writers and the advice that they get, and I think this is true for any creative project like music or art, that for INFPs, the advice of, you can do, and I think we talked about this in INFP, you can do like, just set aside like 15 minutes every day. And,
Mm,
on each particular day, something might not come, but probably one of those days, something good is going to come. And you can do a little bit of work every day. That does not work for INFJ. That is, now the INFJ might have an idea that suddenly hits them. And I would say you might want to take 5 or 10 minutes to write it down so you don't forget the fullness of, first of all, that you had it, and second of all, you don't lose the fullness of that idea. But that's not going to actually be a productive moment. That's just like filling up your like notebook.
just
What
tagging it.
tagging it, yes. And then what you do need for sure is that like one day a week, that's a 3 to 4 hour time block that says no interruptions.
Hmm.
And then that's where they give themselves time to get into that flow state and then gather up their notes and all of the like abstract things floating around in their head. And that will lead us into this topic. I would say that's about like channeling in a way. Uh,
Okay.
that INFJ is, and this is not true for all of them because there's sort of a yin and a yang version of introverted intuiting, but I still think for both, and particularly for INFJ, that this ability to just channel the creativity as if a muse has like descended and come down and is inhabiting them.
Mm.
And the stuff just comes out on the page. And it's very important for INFJs to not engage in the critical introverted thinking, like the left brain stuff, because then that will pull them out of their flow and be like, oh, but is this really the right word? And then they go like hunting. Oh, I forgot. Like, what is the usage for this particular kind of thing? But if
The
it,
etymology of this word and
yeah, the
yeah.
etymology really, and if they have that 3 to 4 hour time block, that's actually okay because they can give themselves permission to like drop out of flow for 2 minutes to do that, knowing that they have all of this time to like just get back into the flow and do something.
Mm.
Similarly, with say music, that is INFJ can really benefit from having music in the background as long as it's energetically the kind of music that will entrain their brain to be in that flow state. So it's usually going to be one kind of music, especially if they're doing something that doesn't involve words that or if let's say if it does involve words, it should be music without lyrics, uh,
Hmm.
because the whole idea for the music is to simply entrain the brain to stay in this state.
Yeah.
And any kind of music that then disrupts that, like, oh yeah, let's just put on Spotify and it's going to come with all different songs and this and that. There's actually really, unless it's all EDM or something, there's actually a bad idea for INFJ. Spotify was clearly invented by and for perceiving types.
Yeah.
Um, or at least the folks who are like, yeah, I don't need to be in flow for this work in the afternoon or whatever it is. So that is, I would say that that's an aspect of the creative problem solving or the creative production.
Okay. How do you feel about binaural beats? Is that something that's helpful for, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, no, I did it years ago in the 90s when you ordered these things out of a catalog.
Okay.
Um, yeah, no, I mean you didn't browse the web then, although the web did exist and I started using it in 1994, 95 when it came out, but it was really about catalogs and I ordered one of these, a little headset and it had like glasses with flashing lights, like
Uh-huh.
LEDs and headset and you could program it in different ways and it had the little booklet to show you what to program for whatever outcome. And I learned how to do 20-minute power naps, no
Yeah.
problem. And I have kept that ever since. Like
Nice.
literally 30 years later, I still rely upon what I learned with the binaural beats.
Ah,
And if I
interesting.
needed to sleep or something like that, probably INFJ would benefit from binaural beats, be to sleep, for example, or to do meditation or something like that, to as an aid to help them get out of the sort of naggy problem solving voice that is there.
Mm.
Um, and I think also that there's a particular element with INFJ in problem solving that many times the problem solving is around interpersonal stuff. And with people, it's not like you can wait until tomorrow to think about it, maybe. And also, people are not easy. It's not like doing like some computer code and like, gosh, where was that like bug in the program?
Where's the bug?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, now we can ask AI to find the bug, so that's great. But with INFJ, it's like it goes around and around in problem solving something that's actually quite difficult to solve and is very organic and maybe doesn't really have a solution.
Mm.
Whereas at least for my type, usually it's a technical answer I'm searching for. And I'm just like, technical answers can always wait until tomorrow. Technical problems. The computer program isn't going anywhere.
Right.
It's not gonna become more upset the longer I don't interact with it.
Yep.
Yeah. Whereas INFP is much more, I'm gonna sort of think about this in a broad way. And it's more questions around like, how do I feel about this person? Do I want to sort of continue to be very polite with them or should I actually say something? like in
Mm,
a very broad way. And then it's just sort of like, okay, I'm going to decide, I'm going to say something, and then I'm just going to wait for the right moment to say something.
mm.
And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
in that right moment could be any time, but it's just like a little seed that says like, yeah, the right moment will probably come, and it might come 3 months from now. But that's that's very different in the way they do the think about interpersonal stuff.
Yeah. I would say definitely from my experience, it's more of deciding how I feel about it, how I would interact like from their perspective, if that were me, understanding more about them through understanding myself. And I can do that all day. And then, as you said, just being aware enough and present enough, leaning into NE enough, perhaps, to
Mm.
know when the opportunity comes and then to enact my decision.
Another area where INFP and INFJ show up differently in the brain is around values.
Mm,
So there's a particular brain region which, across many studies, the right frontal area, not prefrontal, but sort of like this temple where you have an indentation in the skull, that is associated with values, beliefs, like, dislike, several other things as well, but those are prominent there. Religiosity. By the way, it turns out that people who have strong religious faith and people who are strongly atheist are using the same part of the brain when they
it's a
put them
belief.
in brain. It's a belief at the end of the
Uh,
day. Even though one group will claim, oh no, we're thinking a lot about it rationally. And I'm like, no, you're using the same part of the brain as the religious person. Um, just
mm,
FYI. But what's so interesting
interesting.
is one of the baseline tasks that I give people is this value sort. And I got the list of values and the instructions from another published study that was out there years ago. And it's a list of 18 or 20 phrases that are everything from like a baby to an airline exploding in mid-flight. There's a variety of things there, and the person just needs to go through any way they want, and put a plus sign by the things they like and a minus sign by the things they don't like.
Mm.
And the rule is, or the trick is, that they have to have an equal number of pluses and minuses at the end.
We did this. I remember doing this.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and INFPs generally, and I mean generally, like there are some rare exceptions, I guess, but they don't have a problem doing this task very quickly. Yeah, I know how I feel about this. Yeah, I know whether I like or dislike this. I have seen INFJs spend, and we try to spend 2 to 4 minutes on tasks, spend like 5 or 6 minutes on the task. They're like, oh, I
Interesting.
don't know how, I don't actually know how I really feel about this.
Mm,
And maybe nonsense is a good thing. And nonsense is one of those words that's in the middle, where some people will put a plus and some people will put a minus, and they're like, what does nonsense really mean? And just for some reason they labor over it as if like it's going to be graded afterward. And so there's a
okay.
certain perfectionistic element. And I would say then that goes back even to the creativity stuff, that generally speaking, INFPs are about exploration and
Hmm.
INFJ is about perfection. And it's like, are all the pixels aligned properly? Did I do this task in a way that I can really stand behind, and my introverted thinking and the rest of me is going to be like, yes, I thought about this. And INFP is actually like, I thought about it too, but I've thought about these questions, like how I feel about things, like this is my whole life.
Yeah.
So it's not like a big puzzle to figure out. It's do I like babies or not? uh,
Right.
and that's and the INFJ might be like, I've wanted to have a baby and I've been thinking about that, but I don't know in this particular relationship whether that's a good idea. Am I really ready for it? I'm like, you're way overthinking it. Like from my point of view, or from the INFP's point of view, it's like, you in general, do you like babies or not? And that's and similarly, some other types like INTPs can spend a long time like sorting through the values, because these are not
Interesting.
questions that they normally think about.
Right.
Yeah, except for the like few really obvious ones. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, we we spend a lot of time leaning into our preferred functions, so it would make
yeah,
sense that using it would allow things, answers to come quicker, or the behaviors, the activities to come easier. It's like giving
yeah,
more bandwidth, right, to those different cognitive functions.
yes, yes. That said, I have found that in giving a speech, for example, and keeping in mind that the person may have experience giving speeches or not. That's usually the last activity they do. That
Hmm.
INFJs generally give very well organized, like timed speeches. They'll
Hmm.
probably go over time, but it's definitely very organized. INFP varies from like, gosh, I don't know what to say. And I have to be very careful about giving them suggestions because that might even open it up even more. And they're
Hmm.
like, I'm not even sure what to talk about yet. And then when they do, there's a little bit of like, well, I can tell you a little bit about that direction, and we'll go a little bit in this direction. And the INFJ's speech is a lot more structured, and you see the brain working in a much more with the INFJ, like on task, like low beta waves, like we're just this is what we're going to say, or even theta waves, which is like even more the sort of semi-conscious because they're focusing on word content a lot, and so
Hmm.
the output is also word content. And that's I would say like that's again one of those small things with the tasks that I tend to notice. And this is not like a scientific result, it's just my observations over time.
Sure. Okay, yeah, I definitely want to go down that rabbit hole, but I think we're
Yeah.
gonna put pause on it for a second. So most of us don't have an EEG or access to it at home. So based off your findings, what are some practical, observable symptoms or behaviors that would suggest that a person is operating from one of the different brain patterns or from one of the different personality types?
Yeah. I know that's a really good question, and that's why I've tried to include some concrete examples like about sleep or about the needing a big block of time of creativity versus not. I would say though that there's one other example, and this is in that part that INFJ, even though they're going to have that creative starburst mode, usually has in the brain some, not usually, they do, they have, unless they're really dysfunctional, like they have these analytical anchoring points. And when they get into
Mm,
this challenge mode, which means like when there's a dopamine rise and they know there's a reward or something failure that they need to avoid or whatever it is, that they tend to draw upon these more analytical, like left brain kinds of regions. And then you see that as being the INFJ is more like getting into more detail, being more critical or critiquing. And this is, I know this is like a really funny thing to say, but both types can feel strongly about something. But I have never, ever seen an INFP claim or act as if they are the smartest person in the room.
mm,
Like, never. And INFJ has, on the one hand, this like a little bit of uncertainty or anxiety, like, am I doing well enough? Is this the correct thing? But I've definitely seen times when they talk or act like they are the smartest person in the room. And like they've been in their alien mothership as the pilot, because that NI is just so very certain and
uh,
is just going to land, and they're not even necessarily listening to what other people are saying because it's except for the word content, and they're in this
mm,
analytical mode, and they're like, I'm coming, my spaceship is landing and I'm going to come out and tell you what's wrong.
mm. What I've
Yes, what I have
seen.
observed, I'm going to
Yeah.
grace you with my critique. And I have found, for example, in the writing group I've been part of for many years, I'm actually really worried when the INFJ like is too old to participate or whatever, because I have found like she has just learned to be very blunt when she goes to her analytical mode,
Uh-huh.
and she has never been wrong. Like at first, I'm like, no, 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 I don't like that idea, or like that was said in sort of an insulting way, but I know you're just trying to convey what you're seeing and be practical. And then I just go home and think about it. I'm like, no, she's right. This part needs to change.
Mm,
Um, so it can be brilliant when it's really
yeah.
on point, but
Mm,
the attitude that comes with it sometimes is like there's an attitude difference between the two types. And INFP can be very vociferous, like, oh, this is really important to me and I'm going to speak about it and whatever. But there isn't this undertone of, and this is the same for my own type, INTJ, of arrogance or like I'm the smartest person
mm,
and I'm going to correct you. And I think that's a really big difference between the types. Remembering that INFJ is also minding how much they should be diplomatic and whether
yeah.
to say things in a nice way. And they're also carrying around this feeling all the time that these analytical parts of the brain maybe don't come online until they're in this challenge mode. which is the high frequency brain waves. So they're like, I don't even know. Some part of them is like, I don't even know if this is right, but
Mm.
nonetheless, they're going to use it and it's going to come out like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. It's definitely very difficult for me to assert that this is what somebody should think or do. It's I've got my opinions on what it is, and as long as what I do doesn't infringe on you or hurt you in some way, and what you do doesn't mess up my life, then okay. You think
Yeah.
whatever you want to think. I'll think whatever I want to think. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I think the downside of that is that FPs can, over time, in say a work or interpersonal relationship where they spend a lot of time keep sort of putting themselves one down to be okay, I'm going to listen again, I'm going to sort of live with this again and keep waiting for the right moments, that they can develop a lot of anger or depression or something like that and not deal with it for months or even years, whereas INFJ is definitely going to deal with it. And when the INFJ is angry, like, you're going to know, maybe not right in that moment, but within 72 hours you're going to know.
right.
And it's not healthy to store all of those emotions. So INFPs need to figure out ways to sort of release those. And for
Mm.
INFJ, and this is getting a little bit off topic of the brain, but it's still body mind practice. The INFJ is more likely to have a set of body mind practices, even if it's just something like running or cycling or something like that, that helps work out the stress from their body, and which includes emotions.
Definitely. I know that that would be helpful if I had more of those. I have
Yeah.
my own practices, tapping and NLP and hypnosis and things like that. But just getting out and being more physically active, going for a run or something like that would definitely be helpful. Doing yoga or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, you mentioned like when an INFJ is angry, you're gonna know. When an INFP gets to that point where they're ready to express that anger, then you're gonna know, and it's gonna be probably too late,
Oh
right? But
yeah.
like underneath that, there's a lot of passive aggressiveness and like
Mm-hmm.
sizzling and a lot of, yeah, very unhealthy behaviors too. Because it's like, well, no, I can deal with it. I can push it down. It's not that big of a deal. I'm not gonna die. It's gonna be okay. And then it just kind of builds and builds,
Yeah.
unless
Yeah.
there is some practice of actually expressing how you
Mm,
feel about things, externalizing it.
yeah. Yeah. And many times, because INFP is paying attention to things like voice tone and intention, they may have feel that they communicated even fairly clearly by the voice tone that they attached to something ever so subtly as they spoke.
Yeah,
And for unless the other person is an FP type or just in general trained in a way that really develops that skill in the brain, they're just literally your audience is not going to know it.
yeah,
Like, they're not going to hear the difference and it'll just boop, like, go right over their head.
definitely.
Yeah.
I know that one. You can't expect other people to read your mind. And then even though like I feel like I communicated, it's got to be very overt and explicit and clear. And I think that's helpful for both parties, the
Mm-hmm.
INFP themselves as well as the partner.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Okay. Was there anything else on that, or should we talk about some at-home experiments? Should we go on to the next
I
one?
think at-home experiments is good. I would say that they're more like observing. These experiments are observing how you do things. One of them is the creativity. And is it more like gathering from a lot of different places? And I know this is a common idea in the type community, and I accept it,
It's
that
okay.
there's more like
Yeah.
divergent thinking, and that shows up as this Christmas tree pattern versus, and so an INFJ, someone who thinks, again, probably INFJ can try that method, like brainstorming and like putting on a lot of different things around them and like see what comes of that, is probably just going to annoy them and be like, oh, well,
Yeah.
that was an interesting experiment, not doing that again.
That's
And
feedback.
conversely, INFP can sit in a room quietly and put on some like, and because you're trained in this, I think you'll understand, put on some like hypnotic beat, for example,
Mhm.
and go like relax down into a semi-conscious state with an intention. And the way I describe that, the self experience is you're taking a question or intention and you're putting it in a box and you're sending it to the unconscious, and then you're
Mm.
letting the unconscious send it back and give you an answer. And so it's it. And I do think there are INFPs who do this, who say, I went to take this meditation course, or we did this, like, especially if the INFP gets involved in shamanism or something like that,
Mm.
then they do have that experience and they do go on a little vision quest in their mind. And it tends to be and the difference is it tends to be a very playful vision quest. And I've heard, I don't know how many, I think I estimated at least 300, and that was several years ago, like shamanic drum journey experiences that are usually half an hour in length.
Mm-hmm.
INFP is all over the place and lots of weird things happen. The animals talk. There's a circus clown that comes in. They go over here, like
Yeah.
this and that happens. It's very entertaining. And then at the end, and how do you feel about that? And they're like, oh no, I feel good now.
Do you
INFJ,
remember our session? Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt,
yeah,
but yeah, okay.
yes, yeah. And INFJ tends to have more serious shamanic journeys that are, I met with my spirit animal and I had an intention of doing such and such, and the spirit animal and I merged together as one. And then we went on this journey through the
Mm.
countryside, and I was faced with this moment where, having merged with my wolf, let's say it's a carnivore spirit animal, I had to kill something
No.
that the wolf would not think twice about in real life. And then that became, and then I understood as an insight that that's a metaphor into whether I'm willing to do that in my own life. And it tends
Right.
to be quite a clear, coherent journey that
Mm.
happens. And that's, I'm not saying, they can't each have different journeys. I've had a journey once that was completely in Disney style animation, and I've never had this before since, and I don't know where that came from. And if the INFJ is very distracted, for example, maybe it will be more difficult. But having also attended courses where people learn these and then they report afterwards what happened, it's very common, and it reflects the way that the intuiting, the flow is working in the brain. I would say a different one is a for where you have difficulties with people in your daily life as an experiment. Notice, are you quietly tolerating them, or are you trying to find ways to fix the relationship?
Mm.
And the INFP is going to be more, what are some ways that I can adjust in order to tolerate this person? Within limits, of course. And the INFJ is much more, what do I need to say diplomatically in order to fix the interaction? So something to notice as you're doing at home. And then I think this is really, really big difference between the two types. INFPs and INFJs, well, all NFs and maybe all feeling types are into drama. The difference is for INFP, the drama is all self-created on the inside. Oh God,
Mm.
I feel these five different things at the same time. And these different parts of myself are not cooperating with each other. They don't feel aligned. So this drama is an internal thing. And other people are, but what's the issue? Oh, you just need to do this.
This
Or,
is yeah.
yeah, it's no, no, no. The drama all came from the inside. And there's going
Mm.
to spend a lot of time going around and around with that internal drama. And that could be hours or it could be years and anywhere in between. For
Mm-hmm.
INFJ, the drama is almost all external,
Mm.
and it's coming from their relationships. Not, I'm with this person and they make me feel this way. Oh, I'm supposed to be working with this person and I'm having a difficulty. How can I fix this? Or sometimes when the INFJ is bored, they're also just going to create some drama to see what happens, because all the time when we prefer a function, we want to use our function.
Yeah.
And an extroverted feeling likes to, with that polarity with introverted thinking, likes to have interpersonal problem solving is something that it can do. So it really is going to be all of this external stuff, mainly about, and I want to emphasize the secondary relationships. So
Mm.
for both INFP and INFJ, of course, the primary relationships, like your spouse, for example, are going to be something that are going to drive your feelings either way.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're going to impact them. But INFPs do not spend a lot of time futzing and feeling a lot of drama or creating drama around secondary interpersonal relationships. They're just like, oh, this person at work, who works in the other room, actually, like, okay, like that's who they are.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. Whereas INFJ is going to feel, no, I need to do something about this if I can. And
Mm.
and so notice, I would say, is your at home or at work thing for your secondary interpersonal relationships, are you putting attention to those? And in general, where is the emotional drama coming from for yourself? Is it all internal or is it more from the relationships?
Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. I was just imagining it as a scale, a big circle ring that you're in the middle. Like, how wide is that ring? That might be a
Mhm.
sign of extroverted feeling or introverted feeling. I
Yeah,
also know just today, I think it was this morning, my wife, ENFJ, she said, I need drama. She explicitly said it. And I was like,
they do.
I
Yeah,
know. And that's why I intentionally within the relationship try to find these things to share. Like, I mean, maybe it comes up, but usually I don't really care about it. But as you mentioned, what kind of little bit of spiciness can I express so that she enjoys the conversation? She has something to talk about. She doesn't get antsy because there isn't any drama, all these little things. So that's
yeah.
one little
FP and
hack that I
TJ
do on my
types.
side.
Yeah. FP
Hmm.
and TJ types do not want bonus drama or spiciness in their relationships. That's a sign that something is wrong. I'm not saying objectively, I'm just saying it feels like there's something wrong. Whereas the FJ and NP types are, especially if they like ENTP or ESTP, are like, yeah, add some spice and drama into the relationship, like yell at each other for a minute and that's okay. Like we'll just take care of it right there.
Mm.
And that's where I think it's something that relates to. I know it's another question that we talked about beforehand, like how are they often mistyped, or the talking about like is there a classic or variant version of each type and when do
Hmm.
they get confused? Like this starts to relate to it. But I still think these are the things that we've talked about so far that are quite reliable indicators of INFJ or INFP.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Hopefully, somebody watching it will have those insights of like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's more like me. Or even if they don't have it right away, experimenting with it, trying it, having that awareness of it while they're, seeing how well they handle intrapersonal drama or interpersonal drama and those kind of things, how much bandwidth, again, they have for those. I think that will be very helpful.
Yeah. And my suggestion for INFJs is if you're in a conversation with somebody and you haven't had time to think about it that much, trust your dominant function over your auxiliary. Like if you want to get into that flow state, because in terms of that flow for like active listening, pretty much it's only the FP types who do true like whole brain active listening.
Mm.
Every part of the brain is like, yeah, we're all just listening. INFJ is going to tend to go towards those like, I'm listening to word content and I'm analyzing it and I'm trying to think of something back. And I'm like, no. You can, with practice, do like your whole brain creative flow while listening. It's just that you're listening for an insight rather than a solution. And it's like, so for INFJs, like listen to get an insight. And it takes a little bit of practice because the INFJ may be used to just getting in that flow state for intuiting when they're alone. And I'm
Hmm.
like, no, you can do it with other people, one other person at a time. Like just practice getting in that state of your like including that circle of creativity as if instead of like a page that you're writing something, it's a
Hmm.
person that is
Mm.
the slate, and get into that flow state of getting an insight. And it will, because it's a perceiving function, is you don't know when that insight is going to come and you can't force it, but
Mm.
it will eventually come. And you'll be like, this is like, now I have an idea for you. That isn't a problem solving analytical idea. It's an intuiting idea that came.
Okay, yeah. I think that's really helpful. Yeah, I know we're running short on time. So is there another last question or are you
I think the
okay?
variance question is really good. When we look at
Okay.
all of the data from the cognitive processes assessment, there are a lot of people who are, I mean, we people report usually if they know their type what their type is, but we don't trust that information. We're just looking on is like what are your top two ranked eight functions out of the eight.
Hmm.
There are a lot of NF types who just specialize in being NFs. Like
Mm.
they're, in terms of how they rank the skillful use of the functions, they're ranking the four intuiting and feeling type the functions all at the top four. So an INFP
Okay.
is like, yeah, I do introverted feeling most. and extroverted intuiting second. But then I also do the introverted intuiting and extroverted feeling a fair
Yeah.
amount. And you can see this in practice because there are some INFPs who have really quite good like social skills or like people management skills. And then there's the INFP who's more of a loner and I'm just doing my own thing. And so this group that specializes in being NFs, that they're maybe 40%. I don't remember the numbers. I don't have them in front of me. But I
Mhm.
think those are the ones that are really going to be torn between am I INFJ or INFP? Because it's the INFP who says, yeah, I do all this intuiting stuff and I can get into a state of creative flow by myself, which is objectively different than they don't have 10 things in front of them. Like they
Mhm.
are aware that there's the space they can go into, which is a sort of weird channeling alternate mindset. I think it's a bit when you do your hypnotic visual metaphor stuff. This is a state that we're going into and we're playing around with it, but it clearly has an intention and there's different things we can do in it, but it is a special state.
Mhm.
And that to me is very, and when I did it with you, I'm, oh yeah, this is definitely introverted intuiting. You're leading me with some extroverted intuiting and introverted intuiting stuff, but I totally get it. Like this is my
Yeah.
thing.
Oh,
Like,
it's I love it. It's so good for NFs. I've done it plenty of times with other NFs, but just in general too, with both forms of intuition. I can say
yeah.
it's endlessly just there's curiosity everywhere for me because I'm, oh, what's the next step? What's going to happen here? But
Mhm.
there's also very deep symbolic metaphorical connections to the unconscious mind, which I
Yeah.
think introverted intuition appreciates.
Yes, yeah, and it's in fact entrusting. It's trusting the relationship with the unconscious,
Hmm.
and that to me is a hallmark of introverted intuiting. That I trust my relationship with my unconscious, um,
Mm.
and similarly for INFJ to go through that process of figuring out what do actually I want, how do I feel,
Hmm.
not how I'm supposed to feel or what people want to hear. Oh, there's this teacher who came in and they've come from Harvard and they're very well regarded and I loved their book that they wrote and it's so amazing. That doesn't mean you have to like the person. It really doesn't. It's okay to have your own feelings separate from your evaluation. And even in a social situation or a relationship, for the INFJ to not be so focused on what is a socially appropriate or expected thing, or what does the other person want from me, or how are they feeling, but to
Hmm.
actually be like deep down, oh yeah, I've been letting this anger sort of simmer here and I haven't even been looking at it and for years. And so to get in touch with it, or there's something I actually really love and would love to do that's just for me and the rest of the family or my friends, they're not into it. And you can do something with different people. You don't have to go with your standard set of friends. Yeah, they
Hmm.
might be there. Well, why did you not include us? I don't know, but figure out what to say. But it's okay to do things for yourself. So
Yeah.
there's these people who really, and so this isn't brain science, but it does come from a lot of heavy duty statistics and a huge database showing that this is 40% of INFJs and INFPs just specialize in being NFs. And they're just very idealistic and they can relate to all the different other NF types. And then there's the other version, which is another 45%, which is quite different. And it's usually about adapting to society in some way. And I
Hmm.
remember in talking about the INFP and introverted feeling types, for them, it's, oh gosh, I need to develop extroverted thinking and introverted sensing. Fortunately, the culture gives everyday examples walking down the street everywhere. Everything is an example of STJ.
Yeah.
So it's easy to just be, instead of specializing in F, I'm going to specialize in my first four functions, even though
Mm.
half of that is not really me, it's my opposite. And then there's
Hmm.
another 15% who are just weirdos who are doing their oddballs, who are doing their own thing for whatever reason. They just rate the stack very differently.
Mm.
I don't remember the sort of other group for INFJ, the other grouping, but it usually has to do with the very uncomfortable. I'm thinking, well, what I do remember, the uncomfortable process of learning how to do extroverted thinking, that you at
Oh.
least mimic it as a skill. Oh, yeah, the company is expecting our performance is going to be based on efficiency and effectiveness. that
Mhm.
I need to come up with alternate plans for how to do things, and I need to have metrics for measuring them.
Mm.
And it's not a pleasant process, but our whole culture encourages that to happen.
Yeah.
I think there's also a version, if I remember, of INFJ that just gets very much involved in the arts and sort of
Mm.
says, yeah, I do extroverted sensing. And they're
Mm.
doing painting and dance and all of these different things that on the surface, people are going to think, oh, are you really ISFJ or ISFP or something? And it's just INFJ is, yeah, I just do lots of artsy fartsy stuff. And it actually it does mean something to them. It is coming from their core type. But in
Sure.
that case, they're developing extroverted sensing in a way that
Mm.
really brings it into their life. And usually they have very specific techniques with it. So I suppose in a way it is stretching into thinking, but it's not for corporate America. It's for the counterculture.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is there something that you've come across that is like the next step for an INFP or INFJ based off what you've discussed about brain differences? And
Mm.
then maybe we can talk about one last thing for those who are in between.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that I do get people who are debating between two or maybe three types come in, and they know type theory fairly well from the
Mhm.
internet, which
Yeah.
is not a good place to learn type from, unless they're really in-depth conversations like ours. Yeah, which I would say it's a multi-expert, it's a panel conversation in a way, as
Mm.
opposed to just one person telling. And by the way, there are
I
several people who are very good at talking about type, along with the people who are not good.
sure. I
And
do
but
love what Joyce does, Joyce
yeah,
Meng, and
yeah,
those
yeah,
panels are great.
yeah. Like that. That's a great way to do it. So I would say people come in and they're sort of hoping that the brain imaging results are going to quote tell them their type. And we
Hmm.
do have statistics, and this is something you can do as an add-on feature for an extra $20 or 19 euros or whatever it is.
Hmm.
That is guess my type based
Okay.
on your responses. Although the funny thing is with that, what we've gotten when it says guess my type is usually the types that the person is debating between an INFJ or INFP is often that's where it is.
Yep.
Sometimes INFJ, ENFJ, or INTJ. And I think there are some people who say they're INFJs who are really ISFJs, and that's fine. A lot
Yep.
of ISFJs actually get into creative mode because they're in a creative profession,
Mm.
a musician or something like that. So I do think that happens a bit. The brain is so that guess my type usually just shows the exact same reason. Like it shows, yeah, you had INFJ here, but just 1% less as INFP. And they're like, well, that's not really that helpful. So I know people want that and they would love to hear that, but I think what's actually more helpful is hearing something like, what subtype am I? Like dominant, creative, normalizing, harmonizing, and just like the ranking of that, because it's not really a smaller box, it's like a ranking.
Hmm.
And that reveals for people objectively, in a way, these were the solid data points I needed to understand how my mind works. Now I can decide what my type is. And this
Mm.
wasn't something I was expecting, but quite often people have come back to me after they get the brain imaging results, and that report says nothing about type. And they're like, now I am clear on my type.
Okay.
And that, I mean, we have some resources to help with that afterward, but that really helps people a lot. And in terms of what's next, I would say do look at whatever your six function is. Like
Hmm.
that is very helpful. And do mind what your quote neurotic zone is, because the neurotic zone for INFP and INFJ is very, very different. The
Hmm.
neurotic zone for INFP is introverted sensing for the most part. So it's lots of sensing oriented things, the physical environment, my body, all that kind of stuff. How, and this was the joke in one of the other ones, like the suitcase is still in the hallway after a month. Uh,
Yeah.
INFJ already put that away in the first 10 minutes.
I got one right over there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. And so it's just like minding what that is, where INFJ has this back and forth relationship, like love hate relationship with introverted thinking.
mhm.
And those are two very different functions. So this
Yeah.
is again, that's not like brain science per se, but how I would say it shows up is when people get into the challenge mode, which means that we're just looking at the brain when it's associated with the dopamine release, that the regions that get stimulated are very different. And for INFPs, it's more stuff that is going to be, yeah, that supports introverted sensing pretty well. And for INFJ, it's like these analytical regions, which aren't on while they're walking down the street, so to speak, but do turn on when they're pressed. And so, like, be aware of that and work on that, and also work on your third function, like whatever that is, and your third function and your sixth function.
Sixth. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it will, ironically, maybe even harder to tell, but you will be more full as a person.
It's very helpful. Yes. Cool. All right. Is there a place that other people can, get more from you? Can sign up for your workshops, anything that you want to
Oh, yeah,
share?
yeah, yeah.
And
So
then we
there's
can put that in
workshop
the
coming.
descriptions as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's the Jung for Life 3 day workshop, or 2.5 day workshop, one in New York City, right across the river from Manhattan, very easy to get to. And there is the 3 day workshop in Chicago. With both of those are with Joyce Mang,
Hmm.
who will be there. I would invite you, but I know you're in Japan and that's a little bit of a trek.
Thanks. Yeah.
And those are fun. And then just going to Radiance House. But I would say the easiest thing is to just go on Amazon and type in my name, and
Yep.
then you can get an ebook or like order an actual book. One of them is even in a hardbound format if you want to
Ooh.
get that. But that's, I'm just saying, that's probably the easiest way to see what's going on with me. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I've got I think three over there, and then one downstairs. So plenty
Mhm.
of books that other people can look into for more of you, Dr. Dario Nardi. Thanks again.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you for being here and helping us INFPs and INFJs understand more about ourselves so that we can play life better.
Great way of saying it. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on again.
Thanks.